All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there, and the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show.
Heard you guys on the line. I got Laurie Calhoun. Where in the world is Laurie Calhoun? That's the game we play over at the Institute, where she's senior fellow and where she wrote this great book, Questioning the COVID Company Line, which is actually a compilation of her great essays that she wrote for the Institute in real time during all of that craziness. Critical thinking in hysterical times. And what she does is she travels the whole world. Pretty sure she's been to every country Britain has ever invaded. And where are you now, Laurie? Hi, welcome to the show.
Hello, Scott. Thank you. I am now in Alhaurín el Grande in the very south part of Spain, close to Malaga.
Cool. So you're swimming in the Mediterranean then?
No, but I do have a pool, so I'm okay.
Cool. All right.
Too many tourists out here now. I don't want to brave the beaches at this point. So,
fair enough. Well, I'm glad you're having a great time, and it's great to talk to you again. It's been way too long.
Yes.
Let me mention to the people that you are one of the great reasons that they should donate to the Institute. It's our summertime fundraising time right now, and basically everybody's donations go straight to payroll. And, for articles, for our writers and our regular fellows and staff, and for book production. We do a bit of book production around the Institute as well. But you really get a lot of bang for your buck if you donate to the Institute, and you get the likes of the great Laurie Calhoun and all of her brilliant writings there as one of your great paybacks. And plus, we got all different kickbacks and donations and free gifts of your choice that we would like to give you as a token of our appreciation for your support of the Institute. And especially you millionaires out there, you should just give us hundreds of thousands of dollars. That would be great. And then I could just pay all of my guys and everybody can keep doing great work. And then I can stop bothering everybody, and it'll be wonderful. So just go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate and see what you can do. We appreciate the very smallest ones as well. Whatever you can do to support. And the great staff that we have and all the great podcasts and writing and everything that we're doing at the Institute there. So I ain't too proud to beg, because it's just to pay all these great people to keep putting out all the great output that they're doing. So there you go. Yeah, and this includes this, which is a great article about how much you don't like secretaries of state, especially this one. And I also don't like him. And I also think that he's probably mostly the president. When people say who's in charge, certainly on foreign policy stuff. I mean, this is Biden's right-hand trusted guy for 40 years or something, right? They're real partners. So now he's not in the White House, though. Sullivan is, so you got to assume I don't know. Anyway, so we got two major catastrophes, and of course there's, China brewing, but we have major catastrophes in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East as well on Blinken's watch. And I guess he thinks that they're both a measure of his valor and greatness. Is that about right?
I'm not sure what he thinks, to be honest. I just know how he conducts himself is more as a salesman for war than as a diplomat. I just have seen no efforts on his part on either the Ukrainian front or the Israel front to resolve these horrible conflicts in which many thousands of people are dying and suffering. Instead he goes to the NATO summit the last couple of days and announces that F-16s are being shipped to Ukraine and they'll be flying over the country soon. So I consider him to be a pseudo diplomat, I suppose you could say. The title of my essay is Parody of a Statesman, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of War, because he's not a Secretary of State. He does nearly no diplomacy, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. So And that really is an important point, because you could just chalk him up to a failure. Jeez, what a failed diplomat. But no, this is all on purpose. And he's not shy about it either, right?
No, he's not shy about it, and he's constantly bragging about how great things are going in both of these conflicts. And I point out that he, in a way, is following the example of many of the previous secretaries of state who were equally warmongers, and they also did more to promote war than to prevent it, and then often vaunted their so-called diplomatic skills when in fact what they were doing was promoting wars.
I like the way you compare Zelensky to Juan Guaido here. This is
Oh, that's right. Well, it struck me, the essay begins with my memory of Blinken parading his children on Halloween in costumes dressed as, the son was Zelensky and the daughter was dressed as the Ukrainian flag. And the children were soliciting candy from Joe Biden in the White House, I suppose it was. And I just thought, wow, this is just theater. He's doing theater here. This has nothing to do with diplomacy. And then as the Israel conflict became more and more prominent and people were focusing primarily on that, Zelensky was getting worried that he was going to be forgotten about, and so started increasing his media spots and asking for money, begging for money, asking, if you can't give us money, can you loan us money, getting more and more desperate. So at that time, I actually thought he was going to disappear. I really thought that it was just going to fade away. People were just going to sort of forget about it. And I guess I was overly optimistic that someone maybe had a bit of realism and recognized that a conflict between a nuclear and a non-nuclear power has to be resolved by negotiation if it's not going to end in a nuclear war with the entire world. But unfortunately, I was wrong. And so he managed to get more money out of the United States government and also out of NATO and also out of the European Union since then. And now he's getting some F-16s.
Yep. They keep escalating it. It's funny, you go back and look at the Washington Post at the start of the war, and the actual supposed Secretary of Defense, it was the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, had said that, on Milley's rules of the Ukraine war, number 2 was keep the thing geographically contained inside Ukraine. Don't let them spread the war to Russia, which seems like a funny thing, like to tell your friend to not fight on the other side of the line when they're the one being invaded. But when we are so involved in the thing, then they got to accept those rules. Only here we are a couple years later, and actually those rules are canceled. You can go ahead and hit inside Ukraine if you want. And here are F-16s, which literally and technically, as Lavrov said, are a nuclear weapons threat. They're made to deliver nuclear bombs, F-16s. So
it's very frightening. Yeah, I don't know what these people are thinking. It's incomprehensible to me how these people are running this government. I really don't understand. I mean, I guess we know with Biden, there's really nothing going on. So I don't know who is actually running the Biden administration, but these people appear to be a bunch of neocons, and they somehow think they can just keep pushing the boundaries, expanding NATO, and nothing's ever going to happen. They will never reap consequences for people in the United States, I guess, is their thinking. But what's more troubling to me is that the Europeans have not pushed back more on this. I mean, they're right there. They're in Europe with, next door to Ukraine. So I have no idea why they would take these chances of having this spread into World War III.
Yeah, I mean, well, on the European thing, I don't know, but for the Americans, I don't like these answers because it's not a good enough answer, right? Like the fear of being called weak on communism or terrorism or something like that's one thing. But here, like, especially with Biden himself, and this certainly would seem to be the case with Blinken, is you have a real self-righteousness here, which, like, for Biden, he always was like that, but he used to be intelligent enough to, like, sometimes second guess himself or think deeply about some issues or something, but he's just been reduced to such a shout of himself that all he has left is shouting. They're like, Putin is coming to Poland next, and and so in that sense, as he put it in the State of the Union, he's FDR and Putin is Hitler. And by FDR he means the greatest American president ever, the founder of the American Empire who beat Hitler. And
That's
so
right.
you're asking him to like back down from that responsibility? Never. Right? And so in that frame of mind where it's always 1939, then, it's a trap thinking that way. And I guess Blinken is just as self-righteous as Biden. He certainly seems to be.
I think that there are many layers of self-delusion, though, involved. I mean, when you look at someone like Anthony Blinken, who has earned a lot of money through West Exec and also Pine Island. And these are firms that are directly working with defense companies. And so they've earned a lot of money through their associations with these companies, because they call themselves consultants instead of lobbyists. And so they get away with it. And so this has happened with a bunch of other people. Jen Psaki, the former press secretary to Biden, is another one who went immediately from her position with the government to a position at West Exec. And the thing is, these people don't actually have any competence in business or in engineering or in weaponry, and yet they get these positions. And so the only thing they can be offering is access, which is what West Exec calls it. So they say they have unprecedented access, to basically they set these people up as, I believe, as kind of matchmakers between companies and government officials so that these companies can sell their wares abroad and also to the U.S. government itself. And these middlemen, people like Blinken and also Lloyd Austin and Jen Psaki and all the others, Michelle Fournoy, all the ones who work for these companies, they enrich themselves by doing this. And so I feel like there's got to be a lot of self-deception where they tell themselves that they're doing the right thing, like they're actually more moral people, and just sort of coincidentally, they're becoming rich in the process.
Wait, how do you say it? I always called her Michelle Flournoy.
Well, her name is French, so Michelle Flournoy is what it would be, but she's American, so she probably calls herself Michelle Flournoy.
I call her.
Never heard her name pronounced, actually. So
the lady that sold the escalation of the Afghan war and then oversaw its failure as Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy, and also, as you say, fortune sitter on her.
Yes, exactly. So they just happen upon these incredible treasure troves of money just by doing the right thing is what they must be thinking, because they're able to sleep at night, apparently. So that's the only way to understand it. I think, someone like Lloyd Austin, it's probably not coincidental that Lloyd Austin thinks that war is how you should resolve conflict, because he's been in the military for his whole career until he, left, and then he got involved in private industry and enriched himself. And so, you ask him what to do, he's going to consult, and he's going to obviously, try to sell as many weapons as possible, which explains why he was on the board of Raytheon, among others. And so it's a little bit frightening, because what we have is there's no division anymore between the military industry and the supposedly civilian government. So there's all this overlap, and they call it the revolving door, but it's much more extensive than I had known before. I mean, I always knew that it happened with the military guys, and the whole idea, of course, has always been, well, they're the only ones who understand these weapons. But then you take someone like Anthony Blinken, right? What does he understand? What does he know about weapons? He's a lawyer by training. Or someone like Jen Psaki, who probably has a degree in communications or something. These people obviously they've never been in the military, so they know nothing about the military. So the only thing they can be peddling is access, which they've managed to do legally, and Congress has allowed them to do it, I suppose, because so many people in Congress do the very same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the American way. There's no shame attached to it whatsoever. This is just exactly within the rules of the game. It's fine. Everybody knows, and
that's
they
right.
don't even know it's wrong.
When
they're
I
not
say they're
embarrassed.
all like self-deluded, I watched Biden's speech on NATO. I mean, there's just no recognition of the negatives that NATO has foisted on the world. For example, the destruction of Libya. No mention of that whatsoever. You're right. Everyone's sort of stuck in this like 1940s thing. We saved the world from the Nazis, and then everything else is, you just don't talk about it, I guess.
You know, it's funny in the New York Times at the start of the Ukraine war, Brett Stevens wrote a thing in the New York Times where he's like, listen, forget about Iraq, forget about Vietnam, forget about slavery, okay? Just focus on Washington crossing the Delaware and defeating the Nazis and the liberation of Paris. And I can't remember. And he's like, so just forget about all that other stuff and just focus on these other things. We're like the greatest American military victories. That's the only American history relevant here. Now's our chance basically to redeem. This is what Obama's guy Rhodes said. David Rowe was like, this is how we redeem ourselves from the war on terrorism. We felt real bad about how bad all of that went. So now's a chance to kind of start over and believe in ourselves again by sending a bunch of weapons to Ukraine, risking World War III and getting tens of thousands of innocent people, well, at least fighters killed, thousands of innocent people killed.
And at the same time, supporting a country which, postponed the elections and has martial law and conscription. So all these young men are trying to escape from Ukraine because they don't want to fight in this, hopeless war, meat grinder war. And so this is supposedly all for democracy. It has nothing to do with democracy. I mean, it's a farce even to pretend that it has to do with democracy. But they keep doing it. And if you listen to Biden, what he said at NATO, he just talked about how basically NATO is the greatest, military force in history, blah, 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 and how it has saved us from all these things. But no, actually, it hasn't saved us from anything. So it's all like this big fiction. And the idea is you're supposed to, keep the alliance growing and growing, I guess, until it engulfs the entire globe like an amoeba. But in fact, all of this is just a pretext for increasing military spending. So all of the members of NATO are being constantly goaded to spend 2% of their GDP on military, even though we just got through the war on terror, which was a complete catastrophe and served no purposes for which was claimed to be intended. It didn't promote democracy. It didn't save anyone. It actually killed a whole bunch of people and terrorized many, many more. But that's just, Biden instead pretends that after he even mentioned 911, when the terrorist attacks of 911 happened, all of member states of NATO rushed to the aid of the United States. Yeah, well, they actually mischaracterized what had happened. It was a crime. And they addressed it as though it were an invasion by a military state, and then, the war on terror ensued. What they should have done, of course, was to pursue the perpetrators as the criminal suspects that they were. Instead, they killed thousands and thousands of people who had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And it's amazing, especially in hindsight, just the level of advantage that they always take in these things. And I think it's really hard to gauge, though, isn't it, Laurie, about just how much of the financial tail wagging the dog thing is going on here, because there's so much ideology of American empire and there's geopolitical interests and there are, office politics and public choice theory and all these things. But then also, boy, is there a huge Pentagon budget, as Winslow Wheeler showed recently. If you really add it all up, not just the strict Pentagon budget, but the rest of it too, that it's $1.7 trillion a year. As William S. Lind had said in the past, the biggest honeypot in the history of the world. There's just nothing like it. And so at some point, at least I guess in some cases,
everything on top of that is just added on top as that's like extra. Okay, so all this, I think it's $200 billion by now we've given to Ukraine. I mean, this money is supposedly incidental. Meanwhile, the debt clock is ticking away. I mean, the country is going to implode at some point.
Right. And in fact, that's my next guest is Mike Swanson, my old buddy from Wall Street Window. And he sent out a thing recently. There's this book about financial collapse. And he says 133%, of your debt to GDP ratio. That's the ceiling. And we're headed that way right now. Start buying things with your cash, because your cash is going to be worthless as they try to inflate away the debt when it all comes crashing down.
It's really remarkable that they continue to do this. I mean, we know we have this overwhelming debt, and the interest on the debt is, astronomical by now, and yet they keep doing it. It just, every time they get together, Congress sends another $50 billion to Ukraine, and they just ignore everything domestically because you can't afford any of that. You can only afford to send money to Ukraine or to Israel. So it's, we really have devolved into a military state. There's no other way to describe what the United States has become. And you see this on every level: the people in the State Department, the people in the military, the people in the network news. So Jen Psaki went from, being in the government to doing consulting with WestEx, and now, WestExec, and now she has a television program on MSNBC. And so basically, all of the versions of the story that people are getting come from these people, So this is why you still see people in the population who will support these initiatives and wave their Ukrainian flags, because that's the only version of the story they ever see.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. And it's funny again how people don't even use the phrase conflict of interest anymore.
No,
I know. Of course, Jen Psaki has a TV show and works with this military industrial complex consulting firm, and came straight from the West Wing of the White House. I think we have Dick Cheney to thank for making all of this palatable and making people believe that there's nothing wrong with it, because he did it. He just was completely straight-faced through the whole thing, acting like, oh yeah, of course I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the moral thing. I'm defending the country by privatizing all these aspects of the military, and in fact becoming extraordinarily rich in the process. So I think he made the world safe for war entrepreneurialism. He's probably the foremost war entrepreneur on the planet, I would say. Yeah, seriously. Well, and I make the case in Enough Already that he really owed the boys at Halliburton and Kellogg Brown and Root big time, because he had been a really lousy CEO when he was in charge. The whole point of hiring the former defense secretary was this guy's going to hook us up with some welfare payments from the Treasury here. And he never really made good on that. Not to any great degree. He didn't have that much influence in the Clinton years, right? And then he and his CFO, whose name I forget, who he trusted to do the work, of course, being lazy and not taking responsibility himself, let his buddy vet this company, and they decided to buy Dresser Industries just weeks before all of the libel verdicts started coming in the civil lawsuits that they were facing over asbestos cancer claims. And it was literally billions of dollars in these claims that they were paying, not just hundreds of millions, but literally billions. And Dick Cheney bought the company weeks before those suits started coming in. And so he just, oh man, he was in so much trouble. And I don't have anecdotes. I need some. But he must have been in so much trouble with those guys. And so then you could see why he's like, oh, you want me to pick your vice president, huh, Junior? All right. I pick me. We're going to war. I owe these guys bad,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what all the motivations could be in the mind of someone like that. It's very hard to imagine what it would be like to be Dick Cheney, but there he is. So out there, having done so much bad for the world and for humanity, and yet there he is.
Yep. I mean, and he's on video from 1994. Everyone should look this up. Maybe Connor be so kind to put it in the show notes. Just search in YouTube, Cheney, C-SPAN, Iraq, 1994. And he's explaining why they didn't go all the way to Baghdad. And it's all really good reasons why. Especially, see, Iran would like to control the south and east of the country. Yeah, they might. And anyway, and how he talks about how bad it would be to fight an insurgency, trying to hunt down Saddam Hussein as he went into hiding, and to build a new government there, and all of this stuff.
Wow. Well, that was right, wasn't it?
It certainly was. So he certainly made the case like it really was his own opinion, not just defending Bush's policy. But I think he even agreed with Baker and Scowcroft at the time that this is what we should stop here, Mr. President, which is what they did. So anyway, for him to go back on that, he had some reason, and it wasn't just because Wolfowitz said so or something like that. You know what I mean? Cheney's his own guy.
Right. Right.
The neocons had their reasons.
Yeah, they have their reasons. But I do think that, it's become more and more frequent for people in the government to be offered these lucrative positions. So you take someone like Nikki Haley, what in the world did she know about anything? And she ended up being on the board of Boeing and becoming rich as a result of that. And then, tried to be the strongest contender against Trump. She failed, and now she seems to be sort of hoping he'll select her as vice president. But I don't think he'll do that because it would open him up to assassination so that she could be president. Then neocons could take over the world. So I don't think he would do that. Anyway, we'll see.
I don't know, man. He's clever lots of times, but also not lots of times. But hey,
I do think he has. I think he has a good instinct for self-preservation. So you can whatever. I agree. He's certainly not the best on anything,
right?
But I do think he's good at that. And so he made a comment recently about how Biden had made a good choice by taking Kamala Harris as his vice president because she's so incompetent that no one would push him out because they would know that they would get her as the president instead. So the fact that he made that comment suggests that he does think along those lines, like how am I going to prevent myself from, being taken out or whatever. So, I mean, who knows, but we shall see. I guess he'll announce it pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, and also he's just hilarious, right? Like, in the middle of the debate where they're just going back and forth, and then he just stops and goes, "You're the worst president ever. That thing that happened was the worst thing that ever happened." I can't help. I just laugh my ass off at Trump.
The highlight was the golf debate when they were debating their golfing abilities. That was by far the high comic relief point of the debate. It was great. I've seen your swing. Crazy. You can't hit a ball 50 feet. And Biden's like, I'll challenge you to a match, but can you carry your own bag? I mean, it was fabulous. It was like really high comedy, well, low comedy, but anyway, it was like slapstick really. And then at the end of the little exchange, Trump goes, "Let's not act like children."
That's so funny, dude.
Hey guys, I've had a lot of great webmasters over the years, but the team at expanddesigns.com have by far been the most competent and reliable. Harley Abbott and his team have made great sites for the show and the Institute, and they keep them running well, suggesting and making improvements all along. Make a deal with expanddesigns.com for your new business or news site. They will take care of you. Use the promo code SCOTT and save $500. That's expanddesigns.com. Man, I wish I was in school so I could drop out and sign up for Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom instead. Tom has done such a great job on putting together a classical curriculum for everyone from junior high schoolers on up through the postgraduate level. And it's all very reasonably priced. Just make sure you click through from the link in the right margin at scotthorton.org. Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. Real history, real economics, real education.
People say to me, "Scott, how do you get so much work done all the time?" Coffee. It helps keep me from falling asleep. And it tastes really good because I get it from Moondo's Artisan Coffee at moondosartisancoffee.com. Moondo's is kind of the anti-Starbucks in that their coffee tastes real good. They have lots of great choices, representing all kinds of regions, blends, and flavors. I'm drinking the Ethiopian presently. Hey, wait, also, do you like saving money on good tasting coffee? Right now, you can get 10% off and help support this show if you just go to moondosartisancoffee.com/Horton. Find the link and the QR code in the margin at scotthorton.org. That's moondosartisancoffee.com/Horton.
Anyway, so I don't know if you watched the George Stephanopoulos interview where Biden was trying to prove that he actually is not as incoherent as he looked in the debate.
I was just watching where he called in Morning Joe this morning, and he called in on a landline, obviously because they don't want to show him that he has a bunch of cue cards in front of him with things to say.
Oh, okay.
So he sounds terrible. He's on a landline, and he's just going off. Like, not one of those cue cards in front of him said, "Be cool." He's just
He
like,
would have read that out
God.
loud if it did.
Yeah, right.
It would have been like, next card, be cool.
Yeah, exactly. Stop for a second and let Joe talk. You know, like you'd have read that out loud. So instead, he's
Yeah.
just going off about, you can't stop me. You know, it's funny.
Really becoming sad, actually, the pile-on. I mean, this is a different topic, but it's related because I think Anthony Blinken has been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes, propping up Biden, making him look as believable as possible. I mean, making the case that he has been the president for these years, when it's becoming more and more obvious that he hasn't been. It's almost like it's like an object proof of the existence of the deep state, that debate. You look at Biden and you're like, actually, he hasn't done anything for the last 3 years. Look at this, so.
I wonder how often they meet. I mean, I know Blinken has worked for him for a long time. I mean, they're buds.
Yes.
He really trusts him and stuff like that. So, or if he doesn't trust him, I don't know who he trusts, but.
Yeah, I think he was actually the national security advisor to the vice president. So under Obama, when Biden was the vice president.
Yeah, I think in the first
they do
term.
have a long relationship.
Yeah, I think in the first term, and then in the second term, it was Sullivan replaced him because Sullivan had been Clinton's guy.
Okay. But anyway, he has been around. He has been in the State Department, quote unquote State Department, really wearing the mask of a State Department employee, even though he just promotes war since 2009. So.
Yeah, and he had been Biden's aide in the Senate too, right? He had been his right-hand man before that. So.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. Yeah, I only knew about his federal post. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then they go way back. Okay. So,
I think in fact,
and of
there's
course,
an anecdote
we
there
can't
about
neglect to
Iraq.
mention that he picked up the phone and called Mike Morrell, and
right. Yeah,
led to the composition of the 51 intelligence experts' opinion that the Hunter Biden laptop was probably Russian disinformation, or it had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. So Blinken did that. And I think he was probably rewarded with this appointment as Secretary of State for having done that, for having just having kept Americans in this anti-Russia configuration where everyone is very, very wary and even paranoid of Russia after all the Russiagate years. I mean, people just will never shake that, I think. And that has helped enormously in buoying support for the continuation, the prolongation of the war in Ukraine when it should have been resolved by diplomatic means years ago.
Yeah. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't quite place it, but I know that there's more to that story about Blinken in the laptop. And something that he had done for Hunter, but it's escaping me right now. I know it's in the book somewhere.
Oh, okay.
I got what Biden Sr.'s got here.
He was like at that point, he was a Biden campaign advisor. And they wanted to just come up with some talking points to finish the effect right before the election of the appearance of this laptop. And so that was like his job, was to sort of get the media to downplay the whole thing. And, this is how he did it. He got people, not only former intelligence experts, but also people who were at that time contracted by the CIA. And so, the document is called New Information Shows CIA Contractors Colluded with the Biden Campaign to Discredit Hunter Biden Laptop Story. And this comes from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. It just came out late June 25th. So there's a whole report on the CIA subcommittee's investigation of what happened. And some of the people who signed the letter were, in fact, on active contract with the CIA. So this raises all these questions about... the CIA is not supposed to be doing domestic stuff. Of course, we know they do, but anyway, it will be investigated further, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I just found that section in my book, and I don't have anything extra on Blinken's motive there other than wanting to help Biden win.
Right.
But that he was the one, according to Morrell, that phone call, quote, triggered, end quote, his move to go ahead and round up all the experts to lie.
Pretty remarkable. And then when they were approached later, when it emerged that, in fact, when the FBI itself admitted that the laptop was genuine and it was not planted, and the documents on it were in fact authentic, that I think it was New York Post, maybe some other newspapers, reached out to all the 51 intelligence experts, asking them were they going to retract their statement, and most of them just said no comment, no comment, no comment, or based on what I knew at the time, I stand by my comment, I stand by what I said, So, but most of them just refuse even to acknowledge that they were wrong on that.
Right. Hey, all I had to do was page down a little bit more, and I found the second part of that. It was later revealed that Anthony Blinken had his own personal reason to see the laptop suppressed. He knew it contained evidence that he had lied to Congress about his knowledge of Hunter Biden's role on the board of Burisma and its hiring of the Washington, D.C. lobbying firm Blue Star Strategies. So it later was proven that he knew about it and that he had lied to Congress and told them that he didn't.
Okay,
And
there we
was
go.
in the
Okay,
laptop.
that's a much stronger reason, isn't it? Well, I mean, I think, he had multiple reasons, but that personal reason is even stronger. Oh, wow, interesting.
Yeah, one thing great about having this early onset 100% pot-induced dementia is that I learn new things reading my own book all the time. I'm like, oh, this is really fascinating stuff.
Well, when it's so densely documented, you can't possibly remember all this, tiny little grains. You have a very granular coverage of all these things. Most people have a kind of summary statement, and you really dive into the details. So,
well, I knew it was something. I knew he had two reasons, and but I didn't remember what the second one was. So that was what it was. There was proof in the laptop that he had lied to Congress about what he knew about Burisma hiring Hunter and Hunter influencing Burisma to hire Blue Star Strategies. So,
that I did not know. Thank you. Okay, interesting.
Yes, everybody add that to the anecdotes in your head that you know about things. It's very important. So anyway,
so he's even worse than I thought. Okay, thank you.
That's right. Okay. It's always worse. I mean,
it's a kind of overdetermined at this point. Like, I just think he's so bad on so many levels. And so he's got to be incredibly self-deluded because, he does these things. Like I talk about his little performance in a basement bar in Kiev where he played the guitar. He played Neil Young's Ballad for Freedom. I think it's Rockin' in the Free World or something like that. And this is in a bar in Kiev. The country is at war. And this is, simultaneous with all these young people being hunted down by the conscription police to go, not even just young people, men from the ages of 18 to 60, being hunted down for failure to present themselves and go fight in the meat grinder war. So,
And this is, that song is sarcastic. It's just like,
right.
well, Born in the USA is not sarcastic, but it's, got a deeper meaning if you actually listen to the lyrics between the chorus. You know what I mean? It's about a brother coming home from Vietnam and the economy sucks and the world sucks and nobody cares and it sucks. And this one was, about he's mocking H.W. Bush and his Iraq War I and his 1,000 points of light and all of this stuff. And he's going, oh, yeah, keep on rocking in the free world. While meanwhile, they're dropping bombs on people and exploding them to death. And, of course, bringing on the next era of war.
He's so clueless that he didn't even know that. I mean, it's really, is it funny? It's sad, I guess.
He must have, he's doing karaoke or whatever, right? Like, isn't he reading the lyrics that, Anthony Blinken's war is bullshit is right there in the song?
I mean, maybe it's perfectly fitting because his whole thing is just, theatrical performances and whatever's going to fool hoi polloi. He obviously thinks that people are really stupid and they believe all this nonsense that he's constantly telling them. He's always putting up these memes, not him, but whoever runs his Twitter account, these memes about freedom and how great Ukraine is. He's always floating the Ukraine flag and, he's just as bad on Israel and Gaza. Really,
hey, why don't you talk about that for a while here? Go ahead.
Okay, well, just the fact that he'll give these what appear to be heartfelt performances talking about the humanity of the Palestinians. And then, he pivots and he's like, yeah, we're sending a whole bunch of more weapons and, missiles to Israel so that they can defend themselves. Well, I mean, how does killing thousands of children defend anyone, really? And yet he somehow manages to compartmentalize all this in his mind as though he's helping both the Israelis and the residents of Gaza. They have little aid packages going out now and then, so that once they reduce a neighborhood to rubble, they maybe hand out a little bit of food and water to the survivors. It's awful. He's such a hypocrite on that. And they won't really make any efforts to get Bibi to stop. They just won't. They've kind of just allowed him. They act like it was 9/11 only in Israel. So 10/7/23. So they act like basically anything goes. He can do whatever he wants to defend his country, when in fact he's not defending his country. He's actually destroying his country because he's making it so it will never be safe for anyone again. I mean, because every time you kill these children, you're just producing more potential radical jihadists.
Got that right. Yep. And we were talking about that earlier, where that's the official warnings coming in as well, that, groups are being radicalized right now by this, just as you would expect them to.
That's right. When you see your brother or your father or your daughter, mutilated by these missiles, what reaction are you going to have? It's a human reaction of righteous anger when these entirely innocent people are destroyed. And so, unfortunately, they end up being molded in the image of the criminals, is what happens. Yeah. So they take up arms, and then that serves as the pretext for even more oppression, and it's just this vicious cycle. The old violence breeds violence. We've seen it over and over again. I mean, you wrote the book on the war on terror. There's a reason why it's spread all over the Middle East.
Yeah, and it's just like I guess I do say this in the books too. Sorry for being so redundant, but just like people from Hawaii or Arizona went and signed up for the Army and the Marine Corps to go and fight because D.C. and New York had been attacked and Pennsylvania had been attacked. Well, that's the same thing as Egyptians following a Saudi's call to avenge Lebanese and Palestinians. Even though they live under, separate dictatorships of various kinds and what have you, it's still...
That's right. And in Iraq, when they said, we have to go defend our Muslim brothers because a Muslim country is under attack by a non-Muslim country. I mean, that's why you had all these people flowing into Iraq to take up arms against the invaders. So it's exactly the same logic.
Yep. And it's the same reason that American Muslims joined the army to go and fight them, right? It's just a matter of solidarity. Who do you identify with? And so obviously religion can be a strongly unifying factor with people, especially when they're under attack, Yeah,
for sure. I will say that one consequence of what's going on in Israel right now in Gaza is that we've seen a reawakening of the anti-war left in the United States. I mean, I thought they were gone forever because they were completely asleep throughout the Obama years, but they're, doing protests on campuses or trying to do protests on campuses. And so that was good that has been good to see, unfortunately, for a bad reason that these horrible things are taking place. But there is some anti-war sentiment on the left. I really was marveling when the whole Ukraine conflict began and everyone had their Ukrainian flags, waving in their yard and everything. And I just found it kind of shocking that all of the Democrats were voting for every single provision of money, provision of arms and money to Ukraine, when in fact they supposedly care about all these domestic issues, which are just being ignored. So the high priority now is just anything that involves producing, selling, and shipping weapons. And the Democrats are all in. So we really have, people have been saying it's the war party duopoly for quite some time, but you've seen it in a stark way this past couple of years.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the Borg group thinking of liberals these days on all of these issues, it's really just something to behold. I don't know of anything that compares to it. Well, I don't know. Republicans in the Bush years were really the same kind of idiots. There's a little bit different dynamic in the Trump years because you have the whole government against the president. So even though he's the president, he's still kind of the outsider. And then you have the liberals siding with the government against the elected leader of it and all that kind of weirdness. But, I don't know.
It's really wild, actually. Yeah.
And, look, I mean, not to insult anybody, obviously there's so many great journalists and so many great anti-war left-wing people and have been this whole time. When people say the anti-war left disappeared, they really mean the liberal posers. And I guess the leftists also do have a lot of different damn priorities. But at the same time, like, who's been really good anti-war people all along other than libertarians? Leftists. I mean, that's who we run at antiwar.com. That's who writes all these great articles and does all this great journalism. People who are to the left of the Democrats, so they're not beholden to the Democratic Party and they're willing to tell the truth about it. Typically,
that's right.
They're not necessarily always to the left of the Democrats, but usually that's the distinction, So, God love them and everything like that. That's fine. But at the same time, I kind of, when it comes to like, rioting kids, blocking highways and whatever, I think all that is just counterproductive and does more harm than good. I kind of still regret to this day, like, how many right-wingers were pro-war just because they hated hippies so much back then. You know what I mean? And like, even Matt Welch at Reason Magazine, he like never really supported, you can't really catch him supporting the war in Iraq, but he specialized in character assassinations against all anti-war leftists who were trying to stop the war in Iraq just because he was so annoyed by leftists. And you kind of can't blame him. You know what I mean? I don't know. So that's all I'm saying, that like they, in a way, if, we want being anti-war to be patriotic. But if the whole thing is, well, you just hate everything about the American system, also including the wars, then I really don't have, there's nothing to work with there. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I was really talking more about the anti-war sentiment in the people who now would describe as liberals, but they're Democrats. I'm talking about Democrats, really. So I'm not talking about intellectuals like Chomsky, for example. Of course, the intellectuals have always been there, a very small pocket of determined writers and activists, someone like Medea Benjamin or David Swanson. These people are left, they're on the left, but they're professional. Let's just say they're devoted anti-war people. That's who they are. I'm talking more about all the people who, here's an example. After Trump was elected and there was that pink pussy hat protest, all the people who got together for that, people who are never politically active at all, but then they got somehow wheeled into participating in that protest, and they were probably never politically active again. Yeah. But they think of themselves as Democrats more than we now call them liberals, and they're definitely not leftists. Right. Most of them.
Yeah. They're Bill Maher people. That's who they are. They're like way better than the left on some things and way worse than them on others. Same kind of dynamic. Right. Anthony Gregory say the best thing about the liberals is that they're not leftists, and the best thing about the leftists is that they're not liberals, because they each side of them have their charms, but they also are so bad on so many things. And then the worst thing about Trump, well, I don't know if he said this is the worst thing about Trump. One of the bad things about Trump was that he made them put aside their differences and both get worse and abandon the things that they were good on, like the leftists being good on war and being anti national security state, and then the left, and then the liberals abandoning free speech and this kind of thing, all so that they could work together against Trump. And so they adopt their Anyway.
TDS is real. I mean, it was like a bizarre phenomenon. I mean, it's still active now.
Coming again soon too. Just wait until the second term,
it's going to be wild how these next 100 and how many days, 115 days play out. I mean, I have no idea what's going on with this pile on against Biden. I mean, it really seems like it's not organic, that it's some sort of orchestrated thing.
Oh, it totally is.
Which makes me suspect still what I've been predicting for 2 years, which is that Hillary is going to be the candidate. So people have been laughing at me when I've told them this, but it just looks more and more like it, because like watch CNN now, Clinton News Network, they're working overtime to just completely demolish Biden. I mean, it's actually gotten to the point where I don't like Biden, but actually I'm starting to feel sorry for him because they're so cruel at this point. I mean, they took off the gloves and now they're taking out the knives. I mean, it's really bad. Yeah. So, calling for him. I mean, it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing because he is a super senior. You can hate him for his policies, this, that, whatever. But he's an elderly man who should be in retirement right now. And I don't like watching this play out.
Oh, I do. I think it's hilarious. I hate him.
Oh, you do?
And
Okay, little.
I absolutely love his disgrace, and I love seeing everybody turn on him, and I love how they have no alternative to him at all, and
Yeah,
how
see,
they just painted
no, the
themselves
thing
into
is,
this
I think
corner with
he
their
is.
lies, you know?
But I think that he is diminished, and as a result, I think of this onslaught or pile-on as similar to kicking a dog. You don't like.
Well, I'm more interested in the part.
You don't beat up on dogs and children and like dementia
Yeah.
victims is the way I look
that's
at
fair.
it. So.
But yeah, no, but I'm more interested in the part about how contrived it is. How like
Oh,
even
yeah.
in the
Oh,
middle
yeah.
of the debate, when all the initial articles that came out against him, they all started the same way. I'm getting a bunch of text messages from Democratic Party insiders telling me this is it, we're throwing him overboard. And it's been on full court press since then, clearly organized by some secret email list that we're not on, that they are.
Exactly.
No question
I think it's the
about
Clinton cartel. I mean, obviously Obama's in on it. This whole George Clooney thing coming out, and after he did this big fundraiser for Biden 3 weeks ago, then he comes out with this long editorial saying that Biden can't be the nominee. I mean, it's unbelievable. Clooney did not do that.
Yeah.
Unprovoked.
Right.
I mean, to use your word, he
No
he
problem.
was asked to do that by
I'm telling
some
you,
little.
if Hillary runs, I'm gonna die laughing.
I think she will. I think she will because she's so delusional. She actually thinks that she can win, and she has the power, to control all these media. She has always had the Clinton News Network,
Dude,
for many years now.
Watching her lose to him
MSNBC for sure.
twice.
MSNBC, yeah. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. And we'll see.
If she's the nominee, there's like no chance I'm gonna live to see Christmas. Like I am just gonna hyperventilate and fall down dead laughing watching her lose twice to Trump. It is gonna be the funniest damn thing. Everyone tune in for the live stream that night and see Scott Horton just laugh himself all the way out of oxygen to death, dude. Like what happened? Hillary lost. The dude started laughing and never came back.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm just saying it's good. They're pushing so hard now, and they're not letting up. So it's obviously not going to be Biden. And I don't see, she can just waltz in and, in her view, save the day for the Democratic Party. So we'll see whether I'm right or not.
That'd be so funny.
I've been noticing this for the last couple of years. Every time some big thing happens on the world scene, she crawls out of the woodwork to make some sort of quasi-presidential statement. And I'm like, she's running.
Oh,
so we'll see. Anyway.
She certainly wants it. All right. Hey, listen, I better let you go, but because there's so much more that I want to ask you, but I'm out of time. I got to edit this show and send it off to the people.
Great talking to you, Scott.
Always great talking to you, too. I hope you'll write another book for us to publish soon.
I will. Okay, thank you. And let's talk more often.
All right. Everybody, that is Libertarian Institute Senior Fellow, the great Laurie Calhoun, author of a whole bunch of great books that I didn't get to publish, including We Kill Because We Can and War and Delusion. But her latest is called Questioning the COVID Company Line, Critical Thinking in Hysterical Times. The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA. APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.